There is a particular kind of silence that falls over a dinner table when something wrong has just been done and everyone present has decided, all at once, not to say so. I have lived long enough to know that silence. 71 years of it. And I will tell you, it sounds different when the wrong thing was done to you. It was Christmas Day, December 25th. The table in the dining room of the house my husband and I bought 3 or 4 years ago had been set with Priscilla's good china, the ivory set she ordered from a catalogue the October before last and charged to Marcus's card without mentioning it. The crystal glasses caught the candlelight. The centerpiece, a cascade of white orchids and eucalyptus that Priscilla had arranged herself and mentioned 3 times over the course of the day, sat in the exact middle of the table like a small, expensive announcement. 18 people. My son Marcus at the center of one side. His wife Priscilla at the head. Her parents, Clifford and Nadine Kavanagh, placed where the host and hostess traditionally sit, or where they had been maneuvered, which amounts to the same thing. Her sister and brother-in-law. 3 of Priscilla's work colleagues who had nowhere else to go for the holiday, which was the reason Priscilla gave Marcus, though I noticed each of them arrived with a bottle of wine that cost more than my weekly groceries. And me, Dorothy May Henderson, seated at the end of the table nearest the kitchen, the chair with the slightly uneven leg that rocks if you shift your weight to the right. My grandson Eli sat to my left. He was 8 years old and had spent the previous 40 minutes helping me arrange napkins, because that was the task Priscilla assigned us both while the adults finished getting ready. When the food came out, it came out beautifully. I will give Priscilla that. Beef tenderloin, sliced thin and fanned across the plates, a pool of truffle-scented sauce beneath each portion. Duchess potatoes, piped in neat rosettes. Asparagus tips, bright as green crayon. The kind of meal that makes people reach for their phones before their forks. The plates went around the table. Marcus first, then Priscilla's father, then her mother, then the colleagues, then the sister, the brother-in-law, the children in their seats along the side. Then Priscilla's mother, Nadine, came through from the kitchen carrying a plate she set in front of me with a smile that was so warm and so completely without apology that it almost worked. Dorothy, she said, Priscilla thought you might prefer something a little lighter. The plate held leftover roasted chicken. From the night before, I could tell by the way the skin had gone slightly papery at the edges. Beside it, a portion of plain white rice. And a scoop of the vegetable medley that had been served as a past starter earlier in the evening, now cooled to room temperature and sitting in its own collected liquid at the edge of the plate. I looked at it for 1 full second. Then I looked at Eli. Megaphone, if this story is already finding its way under your skin, hit that like button and subscribe to Linda's Life Diaries, and drop a comment telling me where in the world you're watching from. She always said the ones who stay quiet longest know the most. Let's see if that's true. Eli was looking back at me. His eyes moved from my plate to his own, the real plate, the one with the tenderloin and the potatoes and the bright asparagus, and then back to mine. He was 8 years old and he didn't have the words yet, but I watched his face do something that only children's faces can still do. It told the complete truth of what it felt without asking permission first. He was horrified. Not in a dramatic way. Not loudly. He simply looked at my plate, and then at me, and the horror was there in the small tightening around his eyes, the way his bottom lip went still and careful. He looked the way children look when they have just understood that something they believed was safe is not safe after all. I picked up my fork. I smiled at him, a real smile, not a managed one. Looks delicious, I said, quietly enough that only he could hear. He looked at me for a moment longer. Then he picked up his own fork, very slowly, and did not take a single bite until I had taken one first. That was the moment I made my decision. Not with anger. Not with plans already fully formed. Simply with the clarity of someone who has just been shown, one final time and with great precision, exactly who is sitting across from them at the table. I put a piece of chicken in my mouth. I chewed. I said nothing. And I began to pay very close attention. My name is Dorothy May Henderson. I was born in 1953 in a small house on the east side of Columbus, Ohio, the second of 4 children, the daughter of a woman who ironed other people's shirts for a living and a man who drove a city bus for 32 years and never once complained about either fact. I grew up understanding certain things the way you understand gravity, not because anyone explains it to you, but because it shapes every single step you take. You work. You are precise about what you promise. You do not put your name on something you have not earned. And you do not, ever, confuse what something costs with what it is worth. I met Earl Henderson when I was 22 years old and he was 26, at a church fundraiser where I was selling baked goods, and he came back to my table 3 times before admitting it was not the pound cake he kept returning for. He was a serious man. Not humorless. Earl had a laugh that could fill a room and empty it of tension in the same moment. but serious in the way that matters. He meant what he said, and he did what he meant, and those two things were never in competition with each other. We married in 1977. We had 2 children, Marcus, born in 1980, and Vanessa, born in 1978. We lived modestly, first in a 2-bedroom apartment on Garfield Street, then in a small house on Dunmore, and eventually, when the children were school age, in the house on Maple Ridge Circle. Earl worked in food service. He started as a line cook in a hotel kitchen, became a sous chef, became a kitchen manager. And then, this is the part that most people don't know, even the people who think they know us, he stopped working for other people entirely. In 1991, Earl Henderson took everything we had saved, everything I had saved, and borrowed what we didn't have, and opened Henderson's Bakery and Catering on Sycamore Avenue. 400 square feet of kitchen space, 2 ovens, 1 commercial mixer, and every morning at 4:30, the 2 of us there before sunrise. I want you to understand what that means, because people hear bakery and they think of a quaint shop with a window display and a little bell over the door. That is not what we built. We built something that began as a bakery and became, over 14 years, one of the largest independent catering operations in Central Ohio. Corporate events, weddings, hospital fundraisers. The kind of accounts that don't come from foot traffic, they come from relationships built slowly, one event at a time, reputation earned and re-earned every single service. By 2005, Henderson's Catering and Events employed 6 to 7 people full-time. We held exclusive catering contracts with 4 hotels, including the Meridian Grand downtown, where I still know the general manager, Vincent Holloway, by first name. Earl always said, "The work speaks. Don't explain what you do. Let them find out." He was right about that. He was right about most things. Earl died of a heart attack in 2016. He was 68 years old and he was in the middle of telling me about an expansion opportunity in the Short North neighborhood when he simply stopped mid-sentence and was gone. I sat with him in our kitchen for a long time before I called anyone. I held his hand and told him everything we had done together, as if he needed reminding. After the funeral, after the paperwork, after the months of quiet that follows a grief that sighs, our attorney, Raymond Chu, who had handled our business affairs for 20 years, sat down with me and walked me through the structure of what Earl had built. The company, the contracts, the accounts, the property. Raymond asked me what I wanted to do. I told him I wanted to keep it exactly as it was, with one change. I did not want my name visibly attached to it. I wanted our operations manager, Gerald Simmons, who had been with us for 12 years, to run the day-to-day. I wanted Raymond's firm to handle the ownership documentation. And I wanted to go back to baking bread in my kitchen on Tuesday mornings, because that is where I had always thought most clearly. Raymond looked at me over his glasses for a long moment. Then he said, "Dorothy, you understand you'll be a silent owner of a company that grosses $4.2 million annually." I said yes, I understood that. He said, "People are going to assume you sold it or that it closed." I said I knew that too. He said, "Why?" I said, "Because Earl taught me that the work speaks. And because I was not finished watching people, and it is very difficult to see clearly when everyone knows who you are." Raymond shook his head slowly, the way he always does when I have said something he finds both puzzling and correct. Then he drew up the paperwork. That was 8 years ago. Henderson's Catering and Events still operates. Still holds the Meridian Grand contract. Still employs people who send their children to college on those wages. I still receive the quarterly reports, which I read on Tuesday mornings while my bread is in the oven. Marcus knows his father had a bakery. He knows it was successful. He has never asked precisely how successful. I have never volunteered it. Not because I was hiding it from my son, but because money, in my experience, changes the texture of every conversation it touches, and I wanted our conversations to stay the texture they had always been. Priscilla did not know any of this. She thought I was a retired woman of modest means living on a pension and whatever Earl had left behind. She thought the house on Maple Ridge Circle was hers by inheritance of marriage. She thought my best years were behind me. She was not entirely wrong about that last part. Many of my best years were behind me, but not all of them. Priscilla Kavanaugh came into Marcus's life in 2018. He was 38, she was 35, and she arrived the way certain people arrive, already fully confident in the space she intended to occupy, needing only to confirm that others would arrange themselves accordingly. She was an interior designer. Good at it, I'll say that honestly. She had a real eye, the kind that perceives proportion and light the way musicians perceive pitch, instinctively, physically, before the intellect catches up. Her portfolio included some genuinely beautiful spaces. When she showed it to me the first time we met, over lunch at a restaurant she chose and then critiqued quietly to me throughout the meal, I told her what I thought, which was that she had a gift. She looked pleased, but not the way someone looks when they receive a compliment they weren't sure was coming. She looked the way someone looks when they receive information that confirms what they already knew. Marcus was in love the way a careful man falls in love, slowly, seriously, and all the way. He brought her home for Thanksgiving that first year with a look on his face I recognized from when he was 9 years old and had found a stray dog he was absolutely certain we were keeping. He loved her. That was real. I did not doubt it then and I do not doubt it now. What I noticed, the first time she came to dinner, was the way she looked at the house. Not at us. At the house. Her eyes moved along the baseboards, the crown molding, the fireplace mantel. She noted the kitchen layout. Not rudely, not obviously. She was too careful for that. But I saw it because I have been watching people in rooms for a very long time, and I know the difference between someone who is admiring a space and someone who is mentally redesigning it. This is a beautiful house, she said that night, and it was true and meant sincerely and also contained something else entirely, which was, this house could be better, and I am already thinking about how. I said thank you, and I meant it, and I filed the rest away. After the wedding, a beautiful ceremony, I will not diminish it, Marcus and Priscilla moved into a rented apartment downtown. For 2 years, things were cordial. I visited. They visited. The particular tension that builds in a relationship between a mother-in-law and a daughter-in-law was present but manageable, the way a headache is manageable when you take care of yourself. Then, in 2020, Priscilla became pregnant with Eli. And 6 weeks after Eli was born, Marcus came to see me with a question. He sat at my kitchen table the way he had sat at kitchen tables his whole life, square, both hands flat on the surface, as if he were bracing for the conversation, and he said, Mom, Priscilla and I were wondering if you'd be open to letting us use the Maple Ridge house. Just temporarily. The apartment is too small, and with the baby, and Priscilla's parents helping out, we'd have more room, and you'd have the apartment to yourself for a while. I looked at my son. He was 40 years old and he was asking permission and he had already made the decision. I recognized that combination. His father had had it too, and I had loved Earl for it even when I found it exasperating. I said yes. Of course I said yes. Temporarily has now been 4 years. I want to be precise about what happened next, because precision matters here. I did not lose my house. My name is on the deed. Raymond's firm holds the documentation. When the property taxes are due, Raymond's office sends the payment from my accounts. The house is mine in every legal sense of the word. What happened was something quieter and more specific. Priscilla moved in and she brought with her a certainty about space that had no room for the idea that the space already belonged to someone else. She repainted. She replaced the furniture in the living room. My furniture, the set Earl and I bought together in 2008, solid oak with a cushion color I chose because it matched the light in the afternoons. She had the carpeting pulled up. She installed pendant lights in the kitchen that I find too dim for actual cooking. None of this was done with malice. I want to be fair to her. I believe she thought she was improving things. What she could not see, or would not see, was that the woman whose home she was improving had never asked for the improvement, had never agreed that improvement was needed, and was watching every change with an attention that had nothing to do with interior design. The house is not what I minded. Houses can be repainted. What I minded was the evening she called me to discuss our plans for the holidays and used the word "our" in a way that placed me firmly in the category of guest. What I minded was the Sunday she called Marcus from the kitchen to fix something, called him with that particular tone that means now, please, while I was in the middle of a sentence. What I minded was the quiet, patient way she had of redirecting Marcus's attention whenever our conversations ran past a few minutes, a hand on his arm, a mention of something Eli needed, a small logistical question that couldn't wait. What I minded was the year Eli turned 3 and I wasn't invited to the birthday party until the morning of, when Priscilla texted me the address of the venue with the note, if you want to come by later. Later. I kept that text. I keep things. It is one of the habits of a woman who has run a business for 25 years. There is a particular intelligence that develops in people who are not taken seriously. I do not say this as a complaint. I say it as a fact, the way you state that water runs downhill. When people decide you are not worth their full attention, they stop being careful around you. And when they stop being careful, they show you exactly who they are. Priscilla showed me who she was in moments she did not notice I was observing. I saw the way she spoke to her housekeeper, a woman named Gloria who came on Thursdays, the precise calibration of her voice between pleasant and authoritative, the instructions delivered as if Gloria were a machine to be programmed rather than a person to be communicated with. I saw the way she organized her social interactions with a fluency that had nothing to do with genuine feeling. The colleagues she cultivated, the neighbors she assessed, the friends she maintained at exactly the distance of usefulness. She was not cruel. She was calculating in the way that certain people are calculating, not with malice, simply without sentimentality. I saw the way she managed Marcus. It is a careful management. She does not argue with him, not directly. She redirects. She delays. She introduces new information at the moment most advantageous to her conclusion. She is, in the vocabulary of my 40 years watching people in rooms, very good at what she does. What she did not account for, could not account for, because she had already decided what I was that I was watching all of it. Eli saw it too, in his own way. Children see things they cannot name, and they store them in the part of themselves that has not yet learned to look away. By the time he was 7, Eli had developed a habit that I noticed before anyone else did. Whenever his mother said something that did not match the look on her face, he would go very still for a moment, the way a small animal goes still when it senses something nearby in the underbrush. He had her eyes, a dark hazel that changed in different light, and his father's steadiness. But he had something that did not come from either of them, or if it did, it had skipped a generation to land whole in an 8-year-old boy. He had an instinct for the true thing beneath the said thing. He would come to my apartment on alternating Saturdays when Priscilla had things to attend to and Marcus was at the office catching up on work. Those Saturday mornings were mine and Eli's, and we spent them the way Earl and I had always spent good mornings, cooking something, talking about everything, not spending a single minute of it performing anything for anyone. It was Eli who first told me, one Tuesday in October, he'd come with Marcus for a short visit, that his mother had changed Grandpa's room. He said it quietly, into his cup of cocoa, not looking at me, the way children report things they are not sure they are allowed to report. I said, "What room is that, baby?" He said, "The room with all the books." She put her desk in there. She said the books were old. Earl's study. Earl's books. The room where he used to sit on Sunday evenings reading agricultural history and listening to Coltrane records with a volume low enough to hear, not low enough to ignore. I looked at Eli for a moment. He was looking at me, carefully, to see what I would do with the information. I said, "It's all right. Things change." He considered this. Then he said, with the precision of an 8-year-old who has already decided not to accept the easy answer, "But does it have to be all right?" I looked at him for a long moment. This small person with his cocoa and his steady eyes, asking me the question I had been sitting with for 4 years. I said, "No, it doesn't have to be." He nodded, once, and went back to his cocoa. And I understood that we had arrived at an agreement, the two of us, though neither of us could have said yet exactly what we had agreed to. That was October. By December, we would both know. The week before Christmas, Priscilla called me. She called, as she always did, with the efficient warmth of someone moving through a checklist. There would be 18 people for Christmas dinner. I should arrive by 2 o'clock. The dress code was, she paused here, and I could hear her choosing the word, festive. She said it the way you say a word to someone you have privately decided probably does not know what it means. I said I would be there at 2. I asked if I could bring anything. She said, "Oh, Dorothy, no, I have everything under control. But if you wanted to bring something for Eli, you know he's always happy to see you." If you wanted to bring something for Eli. As though my attendance itself were uncertain. As though I might not come to Christmas at my own house without the incentive of my grandson. I said I would bring my almond cake with the branded cherries. There was a small pause. "That sounds lovely," she said. "We do have a full dessert spread from a bakery I work with. But, yes. Bring it. Eli loves your baking." I hung up the phone. I went to my kitchen. I got out the mixing bowls, the cake flour, the almond extract, the jar of dried cherries I had been macerating in brandy since November. Earl's recipe, written in his handwriting on a card I have kept in the same tin for 4 to 2 years. I baked the cake. I packed it carefully, in the box I use for transport, tied with the kitchen twine I buy at Moya's Hardware 2 blocks from my apartment. On Christmas morning, I dressed in the green dress I wear every year, Earl's favorite. I put on my good earrings. I drove to Maple Ridge Circle, to the house with my name on the deed, and I rang the doorbell. Priscilla answered. She was already dressed in a cream cashmere wrap, and she looked at me the way she always looked at me, warmly, efficiently, with the particular blindness of someone who has already decided what they are seeing. She took the cake box, looked at it briefly, and said, "I'll put this in the kitchen. Come in, come in." She set my coat on the hook by the door. The one with the broken arm. The one Marcus has been meaning to fix since 2017. She guided me toward the den, where the children were watching something on the large television that had replaced the television Earl and I bought in 2012. The den where Earl's armchair used to sit, the leather one with the reading lamp, and where two small matching love seats now occupied the space instead. "Make yourself comfortable," she said. "Dinner's at 5. We're just getting things organized." Make yourself comfortable. In my house. At Christmas. I sat down. I watched Eli look up from the screen and see me, and his whole face, every single part of it, changed. "Grandma Dutt," he said, and he crossed the room and sat beside me immediately, without any of the self-consciousness children start to develop at 9 or 10. He was still 8, still completely himself. "Merry Christmas, baby," I said. "Merry Christmas." He leaned against my arm. "Mom said your cake doesn't match the dessert table." I looked at him. "She said it when she thought I wasn't listening," he said. "She put it on the counter by the refrigerator." "With the mixing bowls." "With the mixing bowls. Not on the dessert table. In the kitchen, beside the utensils, in the space where things go that are not yet decided." "Is that bad?" he asked. "No," I said. "That's information." He thought about this for a moment. "Then, what are you going to do with it?" I looked at the television. At the room that used to hold Earl's armchair. At the walls painted the color Priscilla had described to me from a swatch fan as warm greige, which I believe is simply a beige that costs more to name. "I'm going to have my Christmas dinner," I said. "And I'm going to pay attention." Eli nodded. He took my hand and held it, the way he has held my hand since he was old enough to reach for it. And we sat there together in the den that used to be my den, in the house that is still my house, and we waited. 3 hours later, when Priscilla's mother set a plate of leftovers in front of me at my own Christmas table, Eli was the one who saw it happen. All of it. Every second. He was 8 years old. He would not forget it. Neither would I. The drive home from Christmas dinner takes 11 minutes. I know because I have made it 412 times, give or take, since Marcus was in high school and I was the one picking him up from wherever his evening had taken him. 11 minutes from Maple Ridge Circle to my apartment on Fenwick Street. Long enough to replay a meal. Long enough to decide what it meant. What it meant, on this particular Christmas night, was this. Priscilla had served me leftovers at my own table in my own house in front of 18 witnesses, including my 8-year-old grandson. She had done it through her mother, which provided a layer of deniability thin as tissue paper. She had done it with a smile, Nadine's smile, warm and weaponized, and she had done it without hesitation, which meant she had planned it. Planning requires intention. Intention is information. I parked the car. I carried Earl's almond cake, which Priscilla had placed in the kitchen near the mixing bowls and which sat there untouched for the entirety of the evening while the bakery's fancy tarts were passed around the table, up the 3 flights to my apartment. I set it on my kitchen counter. I made a cup of tea. I sat down at my kitchen table with a legal pad and a pen. I wrote the date at the top, December 25th. Below it, I wrote everything I had seen. Not everything I felt. What I had seen. Precision is the difference between a complaint and a record, and I had spent 25 years of business knowing the difference between those two things. I wrote, plate of leftover chicken, white rice, cooled vegetable medley placed in front of me while all other guests received fresh beef tenderloin and full accompaniments. Delivered by Nadine Cavanaugh on behalf of Priscilla. No prior notification. No explanation offered during the meal. Almond cake brought by me, as requested, placed in kitchen near utility items, not presented with dessert service. I wrote, Eli observed entire exchange. Eli did not eat until I ate first. I wrote, Marcus did not notice. That last line I read twice. Then I put the pen down and drank my tea. My son is not an inattentive man. He is a man who has learned, slowly and without realizing it was happening, to look where his wife directs him. There is a technique to this kind of management that requires years and patience, and Priscilla had applied it with the consistency of someone who understood that the goal was not to control a particular moment but to reshape what a person considers normal. Marcus had not noticed the plate because, by now, when he was seated at that table with Priscilla at the center of it, his attention moved the way water moves, finding the channels that had been prepared for it. I did not blame my son. I had watched it happen and I had not intervened because I was not yet certain what I was seeing, and I do not act on partial information. Earl's rule, and a good one, Measure twice. Then measure again. Then cut. But Christmas had been the second measure. I was certain now. 3 days after Christmas, Eli called me from Marcus's phone. He was not supposed to use it unsupervised. Priscilla had rules about screens and devices that she enforced with the selective rigor of someone who understands that the appearance of a standard matters more than its consistent application. He called me from the bathroom, apparently, speaking in a near whisper, and the first thing he said was, "Grandma, I need to tell you something." I said, "I'm listening." He said, "After you left, Mom told Grandma Nadine that she did it on purpose. That you're getting difficult about the house and she thought it was time to set a tone." She said those words. Set a tone. I was quiet for a moment. He said, "What does that mean?" I said, "It means she wants me to understand something." "What does she want you to understand?" I thought about how to say it truthfully to an 8-year-old. "She wants me to understand that she's in charge." There was a pause. Then Eli said, in the exact tone of a child who has been paying close attention for longer than any adult realized, "But you own the house." I did not ask him how he knew that. Children collect information the way bees collect pollen, constantly, without calling attention to it, from sources adults don't think to guard. I said, "Yes, I do." He was quiet for a moment. Then, "Are you going to do something?" I said, "I'm already doing something." "What?" "Listening to you." He thought about this. Then he said he had to go because the water had been running too long and his mother would notice. He hung up. I sat for a moment with the phone in my hand and Earl's photograph on the bookshelf across the room, the one from the opening night of the Sycamore location, both of us in aprons, both of us grinning like we had done something impossible, which we had. "She wants to set a tone," I said to the photograph. I picked up the phone and called Raymond Chu. Raymond has been my attorney for 28 years. He is 63 years old, slight, with reading glasses he has never been able to keep track of and a mind that works the way a good kitchen works. Everything in its place, everything at temperature, nothing wasted. He picked up on the second ring, which meant he was at home and not surprised to hear from me. Raymond is never surprised by my calls. He told me once that in 28 years of practice, I was the client who always called right before something became urgent, which he found both useful and unnerving. I said, "Raymond, I need you to pull together everything related to the Maple Ridge property. The deed, the tax records, everything that shows my name and only my name." He said, "Dorothy." I said, "I know." "What happened?" "Christmas dinner." A brief pause. Raymond has a way of processing information that I recognize because Earl had the same quality. He doesn't rush his understanding. "How bad?" he said. "Leftovers." Another pause, longer. "In your house." "At my table. In front of 18 people. While everyone else had the tenderloin." Raymond said something under his breath that I will not repeat. Then he said, "I'll have the full property package ready by the end of the week. Do you want me to prepare anything else?" I said, "Pull the Henderson's documents too. The full ownership structure. The contracts. Everything. The Meridian Grand File. All of it." He said, "Dorothy, this woman doesn't know what she walked into." I said, "No. She doesn't. But she's about to." I hung up and made myself another cup of tea. Outside my apartment window, the city was doing what it always does in late December, moving through its own business with the slightly distracted energy of a month that hasn't fully decided if it's ending or beginning. I watched it for a while. I thought about Priscilla. I thought about what she wanted. Not what she said she wanted, what she actually wanted, underneath the language she used for it. She wanted the house. She wanted Marcus uncomplicated by his mother's presence. She wanted the particular freedom that comes from having your husband's origin story out of the room, his parents, his history, the version of himself that existed before she curated him. These are not unusual wants. I have known women who wanted exactly this. I have also known that the wanting of them is not the same as being entitled to them, and that the particular error Priscilla kept making, the error all people make who have confused comfort with power, was believing that my silence meant agreement. It did not mean agreement. It meant I was not finished watching. Now I was finished. In January, I did something I had not done in several years. I went back to work. Not officially. Not in any way that would appear on a document or generate a record. But I called Gerald Simmons, my operations manager, and told him I wanted to come in for a walkthrough. Gerald, who is 54 years old and has run the day-to-day of Henderson's with the quiet competence of someone who has never once needed to prove himself, said, "Yes, Mrs. Henderson, without inflection, which is Gerald's way of expressing relief. I came in on a Tuesday morning. The commissary kitchen on Sycamore Avenue still smells exactly as it did when Earl and I painted the walls ourselves in 1991. Yeast and sugar and the faint mineral sharpness of a commercial range that never fully cools down. I walked through every station. I looked at the contracts board in Gerald's office. I sat down with the quarterly report I had been reading from my apartment and asked Gerald to walk me through the variances in person. Everything was in order. Gerald runs a tight operation. The staff, most of whom have been with us for more than a decade, knew better than to make a scene about my presence, and I appreciated that. I had built the culture that made that possible, and it was gratifying to see it hold. At the end of the walkthrough, I sat in Earl's old office, the one I had never redecorated, never reassigned, the room that still had his handwriting on the chalkboard in the corner, a reminder to himself about a produce order from 2015 that no one had ever erased, and I asked Gerald one specific question. I asked, "Who is our contact at the Meridian Grand now that Vincent's been promoted to regional director?" Gerald said Vincent still personally handled our account. He considered it a relationship account, not an operational one. He calls me himself every quarter, Gerald said. He says it's the only vendor call he takes in person. I nodded. And the exclusive is renewed through when? End of 25. 3-year renewal, same terms. Vincent negotiated it himself. I said, good. Next time Vincent calls, tell him I'd like to take him to lunch. Gerald wrote it down without asking why. That is one of Gerald's best qualities. He writes things down and asks questions only when questions are required. I drove home past Maple Ridge Circle, not because it was on the way but because I wanted to see it in daylight. The hydrangeas I planted in 2009 were still there along the front walk, bare now in January but structurally intact. The Christmas wreath Priscilla had hung on the door was still up, a large, architectural thing, all white birch branches and gold ribbon, the kind that makes a visual statement about the people who live inside. I thought about the almond cake in my kitchen. I had eaten it myself, one slice a day, with my Tuesday bread and my quarterly reports, and it had been very good. Earl's recipe is always good. February brought a phone call from Marcus. He called on a Sunday evening, which is when Marcus calls when he has something to tell me that he is not entirely comfortable telling me. He has done this his entire adult life. Sunday evenings are his chosen hour for honesty, and I have always found this endearing. He said, "Mom, Priscilla wanted me to talk to you about the house situation." I said, "What situation is that?" He said, "She feels like, and I think she has a point, that now that Eli's getting older, we could really use the space permanently. Like, really permanently. And she was wondering if you'd thought any more about formalizing things." I said, "Formalizing things how?" There was a pause. Marcus, like his father, is not a man who speaks before he's ready. She was thinking maybe a transfer of title. Or something like that. So we'd be on the deed officially, and you'd have the apartment, and it would all be cleaner. Transfer of title. Priscilla wanted me to sign my house over to them. I was quiet for a moment. Outside my window, the Sunday evening moved through its ordinary business. A car, a child's voice somewhere below, the building's old radiator ticking through the heating cycle. I said, "Marcus, do you know what that house is worth?" He said, "I mean, it's in a good neighborhood." Priscilla looked it up and... "The assessed value is $680,000, I said. "The actual market value, based on comps Raymond ran last fall, is closer to $720. And it is mine. It has my name on the deed and no one else's. I want you to understand that clearly." Silence. "Mom. I am not going to transfer title," I said. "Not now. Not because I'm asked. If that changes, it will be on my terms and my timeline. But I want you to know something, Marcus." I paused. "I love you. I love Eli. I want you to have a good home." "Those things are absolutely true." He said, "I know that. But I also want you to think about why, after 4 years of me accommodating every request your wife has made about that house, every piece of furniture she replaced, every room she repainted, every time she invited her parents to stay for 2 weeks without mentioning it to me, why she is now asking you to call me on a Sunday evening and ask me to sign it over. Think about the sequence." He was quiet for a long time. I let the quiet be what it was. Finally he said, "She's been under a lot of pressure with a new project." "What project?" "A big hotel account. Interior design for some renovations. She's been working on it for months." I said, "Which hotel?" He said, The Meridian Grand, downtown. I kept my voice exactly the same. That's a beautiful building, I said. I hope it goes well for her. Thanks, Mom. He sounded relieved, the way Marcus always sounds when a conversation ends without open conflict. I'll tell her you need more time to think about it. You do that, I said. I hung up. I sat at my kitchen table with the legal pad open in front of me and I wrote, February, Sunday. Priscilla is working on interior renovation contract, Meridian Grand downtown. Marcus doesn't know I own the exclusive catering contract for the same building. Vincent Holloway is Priscilla's point of contact for the renovation. Vincent Holloway has been my colleague and partner for 19 years. I underlined the last line. Then I called Vincent Holloway and made a lunch reservation at the Meridian's restaurant for the following Thursday. Megaphone, if this story has found you, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a new story from Linda's Life Diaries. The best ones are still coming, and the people who watch to the end are exactly the ones who need to hear them. The Meridian Grand is 17 stories of limestone and glass on 4th Street, the kind of building that understands its own permanence. Vincent Holloway met me in the lobby, which is what he always does. He is a man of courtesies, small and consistent, and one of them is that he comes downstairs himself rather than sending someone. He is 61, broad-shouldered, with the particular bearing of a man who has spent 30 years managing spaces and people simultaneously and has learned to do both without visible effort. He shook my hand and held it for a moment with both of his, which is also one of his courtesies. Dorothy, he said, it's been too long. It has, I agreed. We had lunch in the restaurant, which is one of Henderson's accounts. Every event in the private dining rooms goes through us, has gone through us since 2003. The server who brought our water recognized me, nodded with the discretion of someone who understands the difference between acknowledging a person and drawing attention to them. I appreciated that too. Vincent and I talked for the first 20 minutes the way people talk who have known each other through work for nearly 2 decades, easily, with a shorthand of shared reference, catching up on Gerald and the catering staff, on Vincent's wife and their house in New Albany, on a charity event we had both attended in the fall. Then I said, Vincent, I understand you have a design firm working on the East Wing renovations. He looked at me. Vincent Holloway is not a man who is easily surprised, but he is also not a man who tries to hide his reactions. He let the surprise show, just for a moment, before it settled into something more careful. Priscilla Kavanaugh, he said. Yes. She's your daughter-in-law. She is. He set down his fork. He looked at me with the full attention of a man who has navigated complicated situations for a very long time. Dorothy, he said carefully, is there something I should know? I said, that depends on what you already know. He was quiet for a moment. Then, I know that she came in through a referral from one of our board members. I know she's talented. Her initial concepts for the East Wing are strong, genuinely strong. I also know, he paused. I know that she presented herself as having certain relationships with vendors. Relationships that would streamline the renovation process. What kind of relationships? She mentioned, in our second meeting, that her family had long-standing ties to hospitality vendors in the area. That she could bring in preferred partners. He chose the word with care. She was specific about it. I folded my hands on the table. Vincent, my family has a long-standing relationship with exactly one hospitality partner in this building. He looked at me steadily. I know that, Dorothy. Does she? A long pause. No, he said. I don't believe she does. I picked up my water glass. Then I wanted you to be informed before anyone made any assumptions. That's very thoughtful of you. He picked his fork back up. His voice was neutral, but I could see him reorganizing information behind his eyes, the way a careful man reorganizes when a piece he thought he understood turns out to fit differently than he believed. Dorothy, is there anything you'd like me to do with this information? Nothing yet, I said. I'd just like you to know what you know. He nodded, once. We finished our lunch talking about the spring catering calendar and whether the hotel's new sommelier was settling in well. When we said goodbye in the lobby, he held my hand in both of his again. It's very good to see you, Dorothy, he said. Give Gerald my regards. I said I would. I walked out through the lobby where Henderson's staff had served 10,000 meals over 20 years, through the doors that the Meridian Grand's own staff held open for me without knowing why, and into the February afternoon. In March, Eli came for his Saturday. He arrived at 9 in the morning, brought by Marcus, who stayed for coffee and left at 10 with the particular energy of a man who has somewhere to be and has been reminded of it. I watched Marcus go with the feeling I always have watching him, pride, and the quiet ache of a parent who can see the shape of what their child has become and loves it even when it is not quite what they hoped. He is a good man, my son. He is a man in a marriage that is managing him, and he cannot see it clearly yet because the management is so consistent that it has started to feel like weather, not chosen, simply there, the atmosphere in which he lives. After Marcus left, Eli and I made breakfast. We made egg sandwiches on the sourdough bread I bake on Tuesdays, with the good cheddar and a scrape of the hot sauce Eli has recently decided he is old enough for, which he is barely. He sat at my kitchen counter on the tall stool that has been in this kitchen since he was tall enough to reach it, and he ate with the focused satisfaction of a child who is genuinely hungry and has not been told to eat slowly and use his napkin. When the plates were clear, he said, "Grandma. Mom's been on the phone a lot about the hotel." "Which hotel?"
"The big one downtown.
"The one with the gold doors?"
"The Meridian Grand."
I said. "What kind of calls?" "Excited ones," he said, with the slight distaste of someone who finds unchecked enthusiasm aesthetically offensive.
"She keeps telling Grandma Nadine it's going to change everything. That it's the biggest account she's ever had.
That the man at the hotel really likes her ideas and that."
He stopped. I said, "And what?" He looked at the counter.
"She said it's better that you're not around the hotel people. Because you might embarrass her." He said it quietly and without editorial comment, the way children deliver information they know is harmful, carefully, as if setting down something breakable.
I looked at my grandson.
8 years old, with his father's square jaw and his mother's complicated eyes, sitting at my kitchen counter in a house I had made warm before he was born. I said, "Eli, do you know what catering is?" He said, "Like food at parties." I said, "Like food at every party and corporate event and wedding and hospital fundraiser at the Meridian Grand for the past 22 years.
He looked at me.
I could see him working the arithmetic of this, the way children work arithmetic they sense is important before they understand why. "Your grandpa and I built the company that feeds that building," I said.
"And I still own it."
The arithmetic completed.
His eyes widened slightly.
"Does Mom know?"
"No."
A long pause. "When is she going to find out?"
I stood up and carried our plates to the sink. "That depends on your mother," I said. "She has choices she doesn't know she's making yet."
"Depending on what she chooses, she'll find out sooner or later."
Eli thought about this for a moment.
Then he said, with the peculiar calm of a child who has made peace with complexity, "I think she's going to make the wrong choices."
I ran the water over the plates. "Why do you think that?"
"Because she always thinks she's the smartest person in the room." He said it not unkindly, simply as a statement of observed fact. And when people think that, they stop looking for what they are missing.
I turned off the tap.
I stood with my back to him for a moment, letting the rightness of what he had just said settle. Then I turned around and looked at my grandson, this 8-year-old boy who carried his grandfather's precision in a face that was still entirely his own, and I thought, "Earl would have loved you so much. You're very wise for your age," I said.
He shrugged, with the modesty of a child who knows this is true and has decided not to make too much of it.
"You taught me," he said.
April.
Priscilla called to invite me to a dinner.
This was unusual.
She did not ordinarily invite me to things. I was informed of things, occasionally, the way you inform a neighbor of a street closure, not because their preference matters but because their awareness prevents inconvenience. An actual invitation, with my name attached to it and a date proposed for my convenience, was something I took note of. She said, "Dorothy, Marcus, and I are hosting a dinner for some of the people I'm working with on the Meridian project. Some of the hotel's executives, my design partners. I thought it would be lovely to have the whole family together, show everyone our home."
"Our home,"
I said. "That sounds very nice, Priscilla. I'd be happy to come."
"Wonderful," she said.
"I should mention, it's a professional setting, so we want everything to feel polished and intentional. I'll handle the food, obviously."
A small emphasis on obviously.
"And the dress code will be elevated." I said, "Of course." "I just want to make sure you know the context," she said, with the tone of someone explaining a fire exit to a person they've privately decided is easily confused. "These are important relationships for my business. The dinner matters." I said, "I understand completely." "Wonderful."
She sounded satisfied.
"I'll send you the details."
She hung up. I wrote the date in my calendar. Then I called Raymond Chu and told him what was coming.
Raymond said, she's inviting you to a dinner with Vincent Holloway.
I expect so. At minimum, people from the hotel. He was quiet for a moment.
And she doesn't know that Vincent knows you, or who you are to that building.
No. Another pause.
Dorothy, this is either very smart or very complicated.
Those are not mutually exclusive, I said.
He laughed, his real laugh, not the courtroom version. What do you need from me? Have the full ownership documents ready. The property deed and the Henderson's papers. Not to present, just to have. Within reach. Do you want me at the dinner?
I thought about this. No, not yet.
But have your phone on.
Raymond said he would. We hung up. I opened my closet and stood in front of it for a moment. I own 5 good dresses. The green one is for Christmas.
There is a navy one I wore to Earl's retirement celebration, which had been his idea. He had wanted to mark the moment formally. And so we did. There is a charcoal wool with a silk lining that I bought in 2007 for a charity event at, of all places, the Meridian Grand.
I took the charcoal wool off the hanger.
I held it up.
It was still exactly right.
Earl had said, that night, that I looked like someone who knew where she was going.
I had said I always knew where I was going. He had laughed and said that was both the most reassuring and the most unnerving thing about me.
I hung the dress back up carefully, on the good hanger, ready. The dinner was on a Friday evening in late April. Priscilla had outdone herself, and I mean that honestly, with no irony. The house looked magnificent. She had arranged flowers the way she does everything, with a precise understanding of what impression is being made and exactly how to make it.
Warm candlelight throughout.
A table set for 12 in the dining room, with the ivory china and the crystal, and this time the food was absolutely correct for the occasion. Braised short rib with a red wine reduction, roasted root vegetables, a composed salad with the kind of dressing that requires actual thought. I arrived at 7, which was the time given. Priscilla opened the door in a deep emerald dress that suited her extremely well, and she looked at me with the eyes of a woman who had issued a reminder about elevated dress codes and was now calculating whether those reminders had registered. I was wearing the charcoal wool. She looked at it for precisely half a second. Then she smiled, the performance smile, and said, Dorothy, you look lovely.
Come in.
The guests were already in the living room. 8 of them, 2 of Priscilla's design partners, a woman from the hotel's events team, 2 members of the Meridian's ownership group board, Marcus's colleague and his wife, and, standing near the fireplace with a glass of sparkling water, in the easy way of a man entirely comfortable in any room he occupies, Vincent Holloway.
He saw me before Priscilla had finished guiding me across the room. I watched it happen.
I watched his expression shift, not into surprise, because we had had lunch in February and he had known this moment was coming, but into something more precise, the particular alertness of a man who understands that an interesting evening has just become more interesting. Priscilla said, with the pleasant authority of a hostess managing introductions, Vincent, this is Marcus's mother, Dorothy Henderson. Dorothy, this is Vincent Holloway. He's the regional director for the Meridian Grand Group, and we've been working together on the East Wing project.
Vincent Holloway extended his hand.
And he smiled, his real smile, not the professional one. And he said,
Dorothy, it is so good to see you again. The room did not change. The candlelight continued its work.
The other guests continued their conversations. Priscilla's face, in the moment between Vincent's words and her comprehension of them, did something very small and very telling.
She looked at me, then at Vincent, then at me again. You two know each other, she said.
Oh, for many years, Vincent said, pleasantly. Dorothy and I go back to, when was it, Dorothy? 2003. 2002, I said. The Meridian's 20th anniversary gala. Earl brought the entire catering team in for that one himself.
A small silence.
Not long. A skilled hostess does not let silences run, but long enough. Catering, Priscilla said carefully. Henderson's Catering and Events, Vincent said. He said it the way you say a proper name, with its full weight. One of the finest operations in the city. We've had an exclusive contract with them for over 20 years.
Priscilla looked at me.
There was, for the briefest of moments, a complete stillness in her eyes. The stillness that precedes understanding. Henderson's, she said. Her voice was perfectly controlled. As in Earl and me, I said quietly. We built it in 91. I still own it. The stillness lasted another half-second. Then Priscilla smiled, the performance smile again, impeccable, not a single fracture visible, and said, well, Isn't that wonderful?
I had no idea.
Dorothy, you must sit next to Vincent at dinner. You clearly have so much to catch up on.
I'd like that very much, I said. She excused herself to check on the kitchen. I watched her go.
Vincent appeared at my elbow, his water glass in hand, his voice low. That went exactly as I expected, he said.
She's composed, I said. I'll give her that.
She is.
He glanced toward the kitchen door.
What happens now?
Dinner, I said.
And then, when everyone goes home, we'll see what she decides.
Vincent nodded slowly.
You know, Dorothy, Earl used to say you were the most patient person he had ever met. I said, Earl was right about most things. We went into dinner.
I sat next to Vincent. The short rib was excellent. The wine was well chosen.
The conversation moved around the table with the easy momentum of a dinner that has been well organized by a woman who knows how to run a room, and Priscilla ran it beautifully. Every guest attended to, every pause filled, every transition managed. She was very good at what she did.
I had always known that.
She looked at me once, across the table, during the salad course. A look that lasted exactly as long as a look can last without drawing notice. I held it quietly, without expression, the way you hold a door open for someone who hasn't decided yet whether to walk through. What I was watching for, through the entire evening, was not what Priscilla showed.
It was what she was calculating.
Behind the performance, behind the professional confidence and the well-managed table, she was reorganizing. I could see it the way I could always see it, in the slight change of tempo when she redirected a conversation, in the way her eyes moved to me and away, in the careful patience of a woman who is deciding what her next move should be when the board has just shifted in a way she did not anticipate.
She was smart.
I had always known that too. Smart people, when surprised, do one of two things: they recalibrate with humility, or they double down. In my experience, 25 years of business, 40 years of marriage, 71 years of watching, it is the second choice that reveals character most completely.
I finished my short rib.
I had a second glass of the wine, which was very good. I talked with Vincent about the East Wing renovation, which Priscilla had done genuinely excellent conceptual work on, and I said so because it was true. At the end of the evening, Priscilla walked me to the door.
Marcus was behind us saying goodbye to the last guests. Eli was asleep upstairs. The house was warm and well lit and smelled of good food and candle wax. Priscilla helped me with my coat.
Her movements were precise.
Her face was composed.
She was doing what she does, managing the moment. Then she said, quietly, with Marcus still across the room, Dorothy, I think we should talk.
Soon. Just the two of us. I buttoned my coat.
I agree. There are some misunderstandings I think need to be cleared up.
I looked at her.
At the emerald dress, the carefully maintained composure, the eyes that were still working the arithmetic of the evening behind their steady surface. Priscilla, I said, I think you'll find there are very few misunderstandings.
I think what there is information you didn't have.
And I think what you need to decide is what you're going to do with it now that you have it.
She held my gaze for a moment.
For just a moment, something genuine passed across her face, something beneath the composed surface, something that might have been, if I were being generous, the beginning of understanding. Then Marcus appeared behind her, arm around her shoulders, saying something about dessert, and the moment closed.
I said goodnight.
I walked down the front steps past the hydrangeas I planted in 2009.
I got in my car. I drove the 11 minutes home. In my apartment, I added the evening to the legal pad.
I wrote everything down, precisely, with the time and the names and the specific words that had been said. Then I closed the pad and put it in the drawer with the property documentation Raymond had sent and the Henderson's quarterly report I had read that morning with my bread and my tea. Everything was in the drawer.
Everything was in order. I went to bed. I slept very well.
3 days later, Priscilla called.
Not with a request. Not with an invitation. With an ultimatum. The call came on a Monday morning.
I was at the kitchen table with my tea and the Henderson's quarterly report when my phone rang. Priscilla's name on the screen.
I set down the report and answered on the second ring.
She said, Dorothy, I think we need to have a real conversation. I said, I agree. A brief pause. She had expected resistance, and the absence of it required a small recalibration. Then, I'd like to come to your apartment. This week, if possible. Wednesday.
I said Wednesday was fine.
I said 2 o'clock. She said, good. There are some things that need to be said. The way she said it, with a particular cadence of a woman who has rehearsed a conversation and is telling you, in advance, that she intends to control it, told me everything I needed to know about what was coming. She had spent 3 days reorganizing the information from Friday's dinner, and she had arrived at a conclusion. Not a humble one. Not a recalibration toward understanding. She had arrived at the conclusion that I had been strategic, that I had embarrassed her in front of her professional contacts, and that she now needed to establish, firmly and finally, where things stood. She was going to ask me to leave. Not from the apartment, which is mine and she knows it. She was going to ask me to step back. From the Meridian relationship. From the business world she was building. From the version of Marcus's life she was constructing. The version in which his mother is a modest, retired woman who sells almond cake and attends Christmas dinners as a guest. She was going to ask me to be smaller. I hung up the phone. I called Raymond Chu. I told him to come at 1 o'clock on Wednesday, before Priscilla arrived. He said, "How many documents?" I said, "All of them." Raymond arrived at 1 with his leather briefcase and the calm of a man who has seen complicated situations resolved and knows that resolution is mostly a matter of having the right documents in the right order. We sat at my kitchen table. He laid out 4 folders. The first, the deed to the Maple Ridge Circle property. Dorothy May Henderson, sole owner of record, no encumbrances, no secondary interests. The property tax records going back to 1989. The utility accounts, all in my name, all paid quarterly from my accounts. 34 years of unambiguous ownership, documented on paper with Raymond's firm's letterhead at the top of each page. The second, the Henderson's catering and events ownership structure. The company registered under Henderson Family Holdings LLC. The operating agreement, naming me as managing member with full authority. The Meridian Grand Contract, exclusive catering rights through the end of 2025, signed by Vincent Holloway and Gerald Simmons on behalf of the respective parties. The most recent quarterly financials, which I did not show Raymond but which were also in my possession, showing a company in excellent health. The third, a letter Raymond had drafted at my request, on his firm's letterhead, addressed to no one in particular, summarizing in plain language the legal reality of both the property and the business. Not a threat. Not an ultimatum. A statement of facts. The kind of document that does not require a response but makes a response, if offered, very carefully considered. The fourth folder I had prepared myself, and when I put it on the table Raymond looked at it for a moment without speaking. It contained the legal pad. 14 months of notes, dated and timed. The Christmas plate. The title transfer request. The comment about embarrassing her around hotel people. The birthday party invitation sent the morning of. The Sunday evening phone calls. Every piece of furniture removed, every room repainted, without consultation. Every conversation ended with a hand on Marcus's arm. Every time I had been managed out of a moment in the house my husband and I built. Raymond looked at the legal pad for a long moment. Then he said, quietly, "Earl would be very proud of you." I said, "Earl would have handled this in January." "I am slower than Earl was." Raymond smiled. "Earl was faster with everything except patience. That was always yours." We went through the documents together until 1:45. Then Raymond put everything back in order, exactly as it should be presented, and moved to the armchair in the corner of my living room with a book he had brought for the purpose. He would not speak unless I needed him to. He would simply be present, which is sometimes the entire function of a very good attorney. At 2 o'clock, the buzzer rang. I pressed the intercom button. Priscilla came up. She was dressed as she always is in professional settings, beautifully, intentionally, with the precise authority of her wardrobe deployed like a first argument. She came through the door of my apartment and her eyes went immediately, with the instinct of someone who reads rooms for a living, to Raymond sitting in the corner. She stopped. "Dorothy," she said carefully. "I wasn't aware this was going to be a, who is this?" "Raymond Chu," I said. "My attorney. He was in the building for another matter and I asked him to stay. I hope that's all right." It was not all right and we both knew it. Priscilla looked at Raymond for a moment. He had set his book down and was looking at her with the polite, complete attention of a man who has made a career of not telegraphing his intentions, and then she looked back at me. "Of course," she said. The performance smile. "Impeccable." I offered her tea. She declined. We sat at the kitchen table. She across from me, Raymond visible in the periphery of her attention, the 4 folders between us. She said, "Dorothy, I want to start by saying that I have great respect for what you and Earl built. I always have." I said, "Thank you." And I understand that Friday's dinner may have felt, I want to be honest about this, it may have felt like I was surprised by your relationship with Vincent.
I want you to know I wasn't upset about that. She had been very upset about that, but I said nothing.
What I am concerned about, she continued, with the measured cadence of someone who has rehearsed this, is the dynamic between us.
Between you and our family.
I think you'll agree that things have been complicated. I said, I would agree with that. And I think part of what makes them complicated is that there's a lack of clarity about roles. About who does what, and where, and when.
She paused.
I think, for the sake of Marcus and Eli and the family as a whole, we need to establish some clarity.
I waited.
She said, I think it would be better for everyone if you took a step back from the Meridian relationship. If you let Vincent and me work together without interference. She chose the word carefully and placed it with precision. And I think, going forward, it would be cleaner if your involvement in Marcus's professional life was limited.
He has his own world now. We have our world. And you have yours. There it was.
I looked at Priscilla for a moment. At the composed face, the professional bearing, the woman who had planned and managed and redirected for 6 years and had now brought it to this, a kitchen table in my apartment, asking me to make myself small enough to stop being a problem. I said, Priscilla, before I respond to any of that, I'd like to make sure we're having this conversation with the same information in front of us.
Is that all right? She looked at the folders.
A flicker of something, wariness, calculation, crossed her face and was replaced immediately by composure.
Of course.
I opened the first folder. I said, this is the deed to the property at Maple Ridge Circle.
My name. No one else's.
The tax records confirm that every payment since purchase in 1989 has been made from my accounts. When you asked Marcus in February to have me transfer title, you were asking me to give you a house worth $720,000. I want to make sure that's clear.
Priscilla's face did not change. She was very good.
I was aware of the property value. I know you were. I opened the second folder. This is the ownership structure for Henderson's Catering and Events. The contract with the Meridian Grand, the exclusive catering rights, for all events in the building, through the end of 2025, is here, on page 4. My name, or rather Henderson Family Holdings, appears on the contract alongside Vincent Holloway's signature. Vincent and I have been partners on that account since 2002.
She was very still.
When you presented yourself to the Meridian board as someone with existing vendor relationships that would benefit the renovation project, I said, the primary vendor relationship in that building is mine. Has been mine for 22 years. I want to make sure that's clear too. Priscilla said, Dorothy.
I'm not finished, I said. Not unkindly. Simply clearly. She closed her mouth.
I opened the third folder. The letter from Raymond's firm.
I slid it across the table.
Raymond drafted this as a summary of the legal situation. You're welcome to have your own attorney review it. The short version is this: I own the house, and I own the business, and I have owned both of them without interruption for decades. Neither of those things is going to change on someone else's timeline or at someone else's request. Priscilla was looking at the letter. Her eyes moved across it quickly. She reads quickly. I had noticed this before, and when she looked up, something had changed in her face.
Not collapse.
Not the dramatic unraveling of someone who has been caught. Something more complicated than that, the particular stillness of a very intelligent person who has just realized that the landscape they were navigating is nothing like the map they were using. She said, the fourth folder.
I put my hand on it.
That one is mine, I said. I'm going to tell you what's in it, and then I'm going to decide what to do with it. What I do with it depends entirely on what happens next.
She waited. The fourth folder contains 14 months of notes.
Dated and timed. It contains the Christmas dinner. It contains the conversation you had with your mother 3 days afterward, in which you described what you did as setting a tone. It contains the request to transfer my property. It contains the comment you made to your mother about not wanting me near the hotel people because I might embarrass you. Her face tightened, very slightly. How did you? It also contains the birthday party my grandson attended where I received a morning of text asking if I wanted to come by later. It contains the Sunday evenings Marcus called me because you needed him to. It contains the furniture that was removed.
The rooms that were repainted.
The conversations that were ended.
I paused. None of it is illegal, I said. I want to be precise about that.
None of it, individually, is anything other than the ordinary texture of a difficult family relationship. But together, documented over 14 months with dates and times and specific words, it tells a story. And stories, once told, are very hard to untell.
The apartment was very quiet.
Raymond, in the armchair, was still as furniture. Priscilla said, slowly, "What is it you want?"
I said, "I want to tell you what I don't want. I don't want to hurt my son.
I don't want to damage my grandson's understanding of his family. I don't want to make your professional life more difficult than it already is, and I will tell you plainly that I am not going to interfere with your work at the Meridian. The East Wing design is genuinely good, and Vincent has told me so himself, and I have no interest in taking that from you."
She was watching me with complete attention. The performance had come down.
This was Priscilla without the management layer, and the woman underneath was more interesting than the managed version had ever been, alert, intelligent, and for the first time in 6 years, uncertain. "What I want," I said, "is my house treated as my house for as long as I choose to have it occupied by my family. My presence at events and dinners and birthday parties, all of them, as a guest of honor, not as an afterthought. My relationship with my grandson on my own terms, not on a schedule that suits someone else. And I want Marcus to know the truth, not all of it, not in one conversation, not in a way that breaks his marriage before he has a chance to understand it. But the truth. Over time, at a pace that allows everyone to absorb it."
A long silence.
Priscilla said, "And if I don't agree?"
I said,
"Then I will have a conversation with Marcus.
I will show him the 4th folder.
I will let him read it and draw his own conclusions. I will also, and I want you to understand that this is not a threat, it is simply the truth, have a conversation with Vincent about what was and was not represented to the Meridian board about your vendor relationships.
Vincent is a precise man. He values accuracy.
That conversation will go wherever it goes."
Priscilla looked at the table for a long moment. Then she said something I had not expected.
She said, "The Christmas dinner was wrong."
I did not speak.
"I knew it was wrong when I planned it," she said. Her voice was quiet and stripped of its professional surface. "I knew it the whole evening. I kept waiting for you to say something and you didn't, and somehow that was worse than if you had." She looked at me.
"Eli wouldn't eat until you ate first. Did you know I saw that?"
I said, "Yes." He's 8 years old and he understood what I had done before any adult at that table did.
She paused.
"Including Marcus."
I waited.
"I have spent 6 years," she said, carefully, "managing your son. I am going to use that word because it is the accurate word and I am tired of euphemisms. I have managed him. I have managed what he sees and what he notices and where his attention goes. And I told myself it was because I was building something, a life, a career, a family that looked the way I needed it to look.
And I think..." She stopped, pressed her fingertips against the table. "I think I forgot that what I was building it on was real people.
And real people don't stay managed forever. They eventually see."
The apartment was very still. I could hear the building's radiator cycling. I could hear the street below.
I said, "Priscilla, what you just said took more courage than anything I've watched you do in 6 years."
She looked at me.
Something in her eyes. Not weakness, not capitulation. Something that might, with time and effort, become honesty. "I don't know how to do this differently," she said. "I don't know what the version of this looks like where I'm not. I don't know how to not be in control of every room I'm in."
"I know," I said. I could see that.
"I've been able to see it since the first dinner you came to at that house, when you were looking at the walls instead of the people."
She was quiet.
"But I will tell you something," I said.
"The most important room you will ever be in is the one Eli is in.
And in that room, you do not need to be in control of everything.
You need to be present. Those are not the same thing."
Priscilla sat with that for a moment. Then she said, "What do we do now?" "Now," I said, "you go home.
You think about what I've said.
And then, when you're ready, not because I'm asking you to, but because you decide it's right, you have a conversation with my son.
An honest one.
About what the last 6 years have looked like from where you were standing. And then you let him respond to the truth instead of to the version you've been presenting." She said, "That will be very hard." I said, "Yes. Most real things are."
She stayed for another 20 minutes.
We did not reach any formal agreement.
There was no document signed, no terms set out in writing.
What there was a conversation between two women who had spent 6 years misreading each other. One because she had decided in advance what the other was, and one because she had decided to wait until the other revealed herself. By the end of those 20 minutes, we had not resolved anything. But we had, for the first time, spoken to each other instead of at each other.
Priscilla stood to leave. She picked up her bag. At the door, she paused.
She said, "The almond cake. At Christmas."
A brief pause.
"My mother put it in the kitchen."
I said, "I know. She did it because I asked her to."
"Because I didn't want it on the dessert table next to the things from the bakery. Because I thought it would look like charity. Like someone trying."
She stopped. "Which it was. You were trying. And I."
She did not finish the sentence.
But she did not need to.
I said, "That cake is Earl's recipe.
I have made it every Christmas for 42 years.
It is one of the best things I know how to make, and it has nothing to apologize for."
She nodded. "Just once."
"Next Christmas," she said. "It goes on the table."
I said, "That would be fine." She left. I heard the elevator and then the lobby door below.
Raymond came out of the armchair, stretching carefully, and picked up his briefcase. He said, "That was not what I expected."
I said, "No."
"It wasn't what I expected either." "What did you expect?"
"A fight," I said honestly. "She's very smart."
"I expected her to fight." "She didn't."
"No." I looked at the door she had gone through.
Smart people who are also honest, somewhere underneath the management. Sometimes they surprise you.
Not often, but sometimes.
Raymond stood at the door with his briefcase and the mild expression of a man who has witnessed more than he expected to witness on a Wednesday afternoon. He said, "Dorothy, what are you going to do with the fourth folder?" I looked at it on the table. The legal pad, 14 months of notes, my careful handwriting in blue ink, the dates and times and specific words. I said, "Keep it.
For now." Raymond nodded.
"And the house?"
"The house," I said, "is my house. It will stay my house until I decide otherwise. But a house is also where your family lives.
Those two things can coexist."
He nodded again, the slow nod of a man who understands something that has nothing to do with law. He said goodbye. He left.
I stood in my kitchen and made a fresh cup of tea and looked out the window at the April afternoon. 3 weeks later, on a Saturday morning, Marcus called.
Not Priscilla. Marcus.
He called at 8 in the morning, which is not when Marcus calls. Marcus calls on Sunday evenings. 8 on a Saturday morning means something has happened or is happening, or he has been lying awake since before the alarm and has decided he cannot wait. He said, "Mom, Priscilla and I have been talking." I said, "Good." She told me things. His voice was careful, the way Marcus's voice gets when he is carrying something new and heavy and has not found the shape of it yet.
About the last few years. About how she's handled things.
With you. With the family.
I did not speak.
She told me about Christmas.
He stopped. Started again.
She told me about the plate, Mom.
What they put in front of you.
She told me it was deliberate.
Still I said nothing. I didn't see it. I was sitting right there and I didn't see it.
How did I not? How did I not see it?
There was real pain in his voice.
Not anger. Marcus processes things in layers, and the anger would come later, and then the understanding, and then the work. But in this moment there was the plain, clean pain of a good man who has realized he was not looking at something he should have been looking at.
I said, "Marcus, you did not see it because you love her.
And because for 6 years, very gradually, your attention has been redirected so many times that it had started to feel like your own attention.
That is not your fault. It is something that can be changed." "I'm so sorry, Mom." "I know you are."
"I also know that Priscilla is telling you the truth right now, which is not easy for her, and that matters. It matters what people do when they understand they've been wrong." "What do I do?"
"You keep talking. Both of you.
You listen to each other properly, not the managed version, the real version. And you call me on Sundays, like you always have, but you also call me when something happens that I should know about."
"Not because Priscilla asks you to call me. Because you decided to."
A long pause.
"The house," he said.
"She told me about the title transfer request." "Yes."
"Mom, I want you to know, I didn't know what she was really asking. I thought it was just a paperwork thing. A formality."
"I didn't understand."
"I know," I said. "And I want you to understand something in return. That house is not something I'm going to use against your family. It is your home. Eli's home. For as long as you need it to be. But it is my house, and I am its owner, and those are facts I need you to hold clearly. Not as a threat.
As information.
I understand. Good. I paused. Marcus, do you know about Henderson's? About what your father built? A brief silence. I know Dad had the catering business. I always knew it was successful. I just never. He stopped. Priscilla mentioned something about the Meridian Grand. About a contract.
The company is still running, I said. Gerald runs it.
I own it.
It has a 22-year relationship with the Meridian Grand, which is where your wife is currently working on the East Wing renovation.
The silence this time was longer.
Mom, he finally said, how much of our life have I not been paying attention to?
I said, enough to start paying attention now.
He laughed, very softly, the way Earl used to laugh when I said something that was simultaneously kind and uncomfortably accurate.
He has his father's laugh. He always has. I did not know until that moment how much I had been missing it. Can I bring Eli on Saturday? He said.
Eli comes every other Saturday, I said.
And you can come whenever you want. I'll come too, he said. This Saturday.
And I'll stay for lunch.
I said, I'll make the egg sandwiches. With a hot sauce.
With the hot sauce.
There are things I am going to tell you and things I am not.
I am not going to tell you that Marcus and Priscilla fixed everything in 3 weeks, because marriages do not work that way. I am not going to tell you that Priscilla became a different person, because people become different people only slowly and only when they choose to, and choosing to is the hardest thing a person who has never had to choose can do. I am not going to tell you that the house on Maple Ridge Circle suddenly felt the way it felt when Earl was in it, because some things that are changed cannot be entirely unchanged, and grief is not the same as loss even when it visits the same address.
What I am going to tell you is what is true.
In June, Priscilla came to my apartment for tea. She came alone, without Marcus, without an agenda I could identify. She simply came and sat at my kitchen table and asked me about Earl. Not about the business, not about the house.
About Earl. What he had been like. What had made him laugh.
How we had managed, in the early years, when the bakery was losing money and Vanessa had broken her arm and Marcus was failing third-grade math and the whole enterprise of our life felt like it was held together by string we were pretending was cable. I told her. I talked about Earl for an hour and a half and she listened the way someone listens when they are not waiting to speak, when they are genuinely taking something in. When I was finished, she said that Marcus talked about his father the way people talk about someone they are still trying to become. I said, that's exactly right. She said, I think I understand. Now, why you keep the fruit stand? I looked at her. She said, the fruit stand, I'm sorry, I mean the kitchen.
The baking. The Tuesday mornings.
I think I understand why you kept it. I said, why?
She thought for a moment. Because it's the place where you started. Before everything got big.
When it was still just the two of you and a wooden cart and something you believed in. She looked at the kitchen around her. My kitchen, with its particular order and smell and the bread cooling on the rack by the window.
I don't have a place like that.
I've never had a place I wanted to remember the beginning of.
I said, you might, I said.
If you build something that's really yours.
She left at 4 o'clock.
At the door she paused and said, without the performance smile, with just her face as it actually was, thank you for not telling Marcus everything at once.
I said, he needed to hear it from you.
Things heard from the right person carry differently.
She nodded. She left.
I stood at my window and watched the street below for a while. I thought about Earl and the cart and the 4:30 mornings and the particular quality of a life built from scratch, which is that it never entirely forgets where it started, no matter how large it becomes. Then I made dinner and ate it at my kitchen table and read the Hendersons' quarterly report, which was, as usual, in excellent order.
July. Eli's 9th birthday.
The invitation came 3 weeks in advance. A card, in the mail, actual mail, with a stamp, with my name on the envelope in Priscilla's handwriting. Inside, a birthday party invitation, the kind you get from a stationer, with the address and the time and the dress code listed as come as you are.
I was listed as a guest of honor. Not those words exactly.
But my name was at the top of the inside card, above Priscilla's parents, above the colleagues, above everyone else. My name, first.
I kept the envelope.
I put it in the drawer with the legal pad. The party was at the house on Maple Ridge Circle. Priscilla had set up the backyard with the organized, beautiful precision she brings to every space she inhabits, and it was lovely, genuinely lovely, the way her spaces always are when the beauty in them is for someone else's pleasure rather than for the management of a room. There were children from Eli's school and neighbors and Marcus's colleagues and Priscilla's family, and Clifford and Nadine Kavanagh, who greeted me at the gate with the particular caution of people who are not entirely sure what has shifted but can feel that something has. I shook Nadine's hand and thanked her for looking after the gate and went inside to find my grandson.
Eli was in the kitchen.
He had put himself in charge of the birthday cake, not the professional cake Priscilla had ordered, but my almond cake, which I had brought, which was sitting at the center of the kitchen island with a ring of candles around it that Eli had arranged himself with the focused concentration of a boy who understands that certain things are important and must be done correctly.
He looked up when I came in.
"Grandma. He said. "I told Mom your cake goes first." I said, "What did she say?" He said, "She said okay." I looked at the cake, Earl's recipe, 4 to 2 years, the branded cherries and the almond extract and the particular golden color it turns when the oven is exactly right, sitting in the center of the kitchen island in my house with 9 candles around it.
I pulled Eli into a hug.
He is 9 now, a little taller than he was at Christmas, still entirely himself, the steady eyes and the quiet attention and the instinct for the thing beneath the thing. He hugged me back with the unself-conscious completeness that children eventually lose and the wisest adults eventually find their way back to. "Grandma. He said, his voice a little muffled against my shoulder. "Are things going to be okay now?"
I thought about this.
About what okay means and whether it is a single state or a direction.
About Priscilla in my kitchen asking about Earl.
About Marcus staying for lunch and the hot sauce and the laugh he has that sounds like his father. About the 4th folder in the drawer, which I have not opened since April and do not plan to open. I said, "I think things are going to be better. Whether they are going to be okay depends on what everyone decides to do every day.
But better is a very good start." He considered this with the seriousness it deserved.
Then he said, "That sounds like something Grandpa Earl would say."
I laughed. My real laugh, not the managed one. "It is," I said.
Almost exactly what he would say. We stayed in the kitchen for a few more minutes, the two of us, while the party moved through the backyard and the afternoon light came through the window above the sink that has always let in the afternoon light, west-facing, particular, the same in every season. The window Earl and I chose when we were looking at the house in 1989, standing in the kitchen of what would become our home, and Earl said, "Look at that light. I am looking at it still. This is what I want you to understand, if you take nothing else from this story. Patience is not the same as weakness. Silence is not the same as agreement. And a woman who does not announce what she has built is not a woman who has built nothing." Priscilla looked at me for 6 years and saw what she was prepared to see. An older woman, modest in her circumstances, willing to accommodate whatever was asked of her. She saw someone who ate leftovers without complaint, who sat in the chair with the uneven leg, who brought a cake that was placed by the mixing bowls instead of the dessert table. What she did not see, because I had chosen not to show her, was a woman who had built a catering company from a wooden cart at 4:30 in the morning, who had kept that company running through grief and loss and the particular difficulty of a year spent learning to want things again. A woman whose name was on the deed of the house Priscilla was redecorating. A woman whose company held a 22-year contract with the building where Priscilla was trying to make her professional name. She did not see any of that because I had not made her see it. I had waited. I had watched. I had written things down in blue ink on a legal pad with dates and times, and I had let the situation develop until the situation showed me clearly what it was. This is what Earl called letting the work speak. You build something real. You take care of it. You do not explain it to people who have already decided they know what it is. And then, when the time is right and the moment is precise and the right people are in the room, you let them find out. The work speaks. And it speaks loudly. I am 71 years old. I bake bread on Tuesday mornings. I read the quarterly reports with my tea. I have lunch with Vincent Holloway twice a year and he is unfailingly good company. I visit the house on Maple Ridge Circle, and the chair they give me now is the one at the head of the table, the host's chair. On those evenings, mine. The almond cake goes on the table. Every time. And Eli, my grandson, 9 years old, with his grandfather's precision and his own uncompromising eyes, Eli sits beside me. He has started to ask, on our Saturday mornings, about the business. About how Earl started it, how we built it, what the numbers looked like in the early years when the margin between making it and not making it was thin as paper. He asks with the focused curiosity of someone who intends to understand. I tell him everything. Every time. Because the work speaks. And the work, passed down properly, speaks for generations. That is what Earl and I built. That is what I intend to leave behind. Last Christmas, I arrived at 2 o'clock as I always do. I brought the almond cake, packed in the box, tied with the kitchen twine from Moia's hardware.
Marcus opened the door.
He said, "Hi, Mom. You look beautiful." I said, "Thank you, sweetheart. Merry Christmas." Eli appeared in the hallway behind his father, already in his good clothes, his hair combed in the way it gets combed on special occasions, carefully, with the slight resistance of a 9-year-old who has accepted the necessity but not the enthusiasm.
He said, "Grandma Dut, did you bring it?"
I held up the box. He took it from my arms with the reverence a child gives to something they have decided is important, and he carried it through the house to the dining room, past the living room with its new cushions that are still not the color of the afternoon light but are closer than they were, past the kitchen where the pendant lights have been replaced with something that actually illuminates the counter, past Earl's study where the desk is still Priscilla's but the bookshelves now hold Earl's books. Again, returned from my apartment at Priscilla's request, 2 boxes of them, in November. He carried the cake to the dining room and set it in the center of the dessert table. At the center, Priscilla was in the kitchen supervising the final preparations.
She looked up when Eli came back without the box. "Did you put it out?"
"In the middle," he said. "Like I told you."
She looked at me across the kitchen. I looked back at her. "Good," she said.
"That's exactly right."
Dinner that evening was beef tenderloin. My plate was full. My chair did not rock.
I sat at the right end of the table, not the head. Not yet, these things take time. But the right end, which is the end where the light falls in the evenings from the west-facing window, the window with the particular afternoon light that Earl noticed when we were standing in this kitchen 36 years ago, young and broke and certain that something worth building was waiting for us here.
He was right. He was right about most things. Eli sat to my left. He ate everything on his plate.
When the cake came out he was the one who carried it, and he set it in the center of the table and looked at me and smiled. The full smile, unguarded, the one that is entirely his own, and said, "Grandma Dut, should I cut it?"
I said, "You should absolutely cut it." He cut the cake. He gave me the first slice.
He served everyone at the table, one by one, with the focused seriousness of someone who understands that certain things are important and must be done correctly. When every plate was served, he came back to his seat beside me and he picked up his fork.
And we ate together.
Earl's recipe.
Christmas Day. My house. My table. My family.
And the light coming in, the way it always has, through the window we chose. Megaphone, thank you for staying all the way to the end. The people who finish the whole story are the ones who understand it, and the ones who share it. If this one moved you, the next video on your screen is waiting to do the same. And if you haven't subscribed yet, come back. There's always another woman the world underestimated. And we tell those stories here.